Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are joining us from. My name is Hawa, Keita, and I'm the lead of the Africa initiative at Concordia University. Today, it is an honor for me to moderate this panel, I guess the only one within the conference dedicated to Africa, and which is entitled Propelling African Entrepreneurs. So from the audience perspective, would love to know from you, like, if you can raise a hand if you have ever been to Africa at some point. Okay, a pretty good audience. So for the ones who have not raised their hand, we wish that after this panel, you might consider it at some point. Thank you. Okay, so why do we need to talk about Africa? So the first introduction mentioned that there is a lot of potential and interest for collaborating and viewing Africa as more than, let's say, humanitarian support, but rather a business partner. Today, we know that it is the continent with the youngest population in the world. By 2050, 1 out of 4 people will be African. And so why do we need to talk about entrepreneurship and SMEs when we talk about business in Africa? Because we know that it is an important driver for social and economic development. As of now, we estimate that MSMEs count for 80% of the jobs in Africa, which is much higher than the world average, which is around at 70%. And so before digging into the panel, we would like to introduce our estimated panelists. So I'm going to start, first of all, with Renato Rossi. Hello, Renato.
Hello.
Hello. So you are an investor at Mada Ventures, coming directly from Morocco. So Mada Ventures is actually, yes, it is based in Morocco, but it is a Pan-African VC fund. And today we estimate that it is the largest with 100% African capital. So they actually invest into high potential and tech-driven startups. And before that, he has also worked in entrepreneurship and with entrepreneurs across Africa and Canada. Then we also have Julie Gichuru. So Julie Gichuru, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here.
Yes, we're happy to have you as well here. So today you are sorry, I'm using my words. So you are the chief in public affairs at Mastercard Foundation and also the communication officer. But beyond that, you're a peace advocate. You are also an award winner journalist, to the point of being estimated as one of the 100 most influential women in Africa. Yes, and we're also very lucky to have her as an honorary doctorate at Concordia University. Yeah. And finally, Matthew Davis. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So he is the CEO and co-founder of Renew Capital. So in 2006, it was founded with the mandate to support SMEs across Africa. So today you are an investment firm that focus on investing with the goal to have, yes, a financial return, but also social impact by supporting MSMEs across Africa. So today you're operating in like 14 countries? Yes, which is pretty impressive. So in one sentence, I would love to know from you, what do you expect from this panel?
Perhaps I'll kick off. Really hoping to share some knowledge on what's happening on ground in Africa. We were discussing this yesterday. Largely, perceived risk is always outweighing the actual risk. Hoping to de-risk a little bit of the investments on the continent welcome more people to be excited about what's happening there. And also, hopefully next year, this won't be the only panel on Africa at this conference.
Wow, that's good. Two things for me. I think number one, I'm keen to listen to the stories of these young entrepreneurs, and I hope we'll learn from them. And I hope that, and I do believe that the narrative will start shifting in our minds on what Africa truly could be. And I think that's important. The second thing is connecting to share whatever little experience, learning, knowledge we have with these young entrepreneurs to enable their journeys. So those two things for me would be great. And it's wonderful to see Africa on the agenda, the youngest, fastest growing continent in the world. So important to have it centered in so many discussions that the world is having today.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would say, and we do this a lot, we travel around the world, mostly in the United States, but also hopefully more in Canada and in Europe. And we have one hope whenever we sit in front of an audience like this, or a small dining room full of high net worth individuals, is, I would say, my number one objective and hope out of this panel is that you all leave thinking a little different about Africa. It's got a horrible brand globally. And that brand is really holding back a ton of capital to fuel a ton of innovation and job creation on the continent. And so it really begins with the way we think about that place. So hopefully in 43.5 minutes, you will leave thinking just a little different.
Great, fantastic. Thank you. So, yes, so as Julie mentioned as well, you see we are 4 right now, but actually 9 people are involved in this panel. In order to make this panel, more authentic, we decided to invite 5 young entrepreneurs from 3 different countries. And we haven't necessarily selected any type of entrepreneurs. So these entrepreneurs are beneficiaries of the AFRISE Challenge, which is a Concordia program to train young entrepreneurs and also help them to boost their networking and to reach their high potential. So we are very happy to have Hélène, Moses, Israel, Emmanuel, and Nana to join us virtually with pre-recorded videos. And they will ask their question and talk about their realities as young African entrepreneurs. So now let's start with the first video. I think it's Hélène. She's in Uganda and works in textile. So let's go for the first video.
Greetings to everyone. I am Munya Sahelen, the founder of Halton Traders LLP. We are committed to tackling plastic waste pollution and addressing the inconsistent supply of sewing threads in Uganda. We achieve this by transforming recycled post-consumer plastic bottles into sustainable polyester fabric sewing threads. Not only does this initiative meet the market demand for over 2,000 tons of sewing threads annually, but it also significantly reduces our reliance on imports and shortens the turnaround time from 60 days to just 7 days. At Halton Traders, we believe that our work holds true value when it uplifts our communities. Women empowerment being one of our top priorities, it's disheartening that businesses owned or led by women receive only 3% of the total venture capital investment. By bridging this financing gap for women entrepreneurs, we could unlock over $5 trillion globally. When a woman succeeds, she not only improves her own circumstances, but also uplifts her family, strengthens her community, and contributes to building resilient nations. Beyond women, various barriers hinder African entrepreneurs, especially during the startup stage, from accessing funding. These barriers include bureaucratic hurdles and the inflexible procedures required by the financial institutions that are often not tailored to the needs of the small businesses or startups. I firmly believe that access to funding should be simplified, ensuring that innovative ideas can become a reality without unnecessary limitations. My question is, despite the growing interest from the financial institutions like the VC funds and the impact investing funds in funding entrepreneurship in Africa, significant gaps remain. What strategies can be implemented to bridge the gap between the financial realities of most African entrepreneurs, especially MSMEs, and the expectations of the financial institutions? Thank you so much for your attention.
Great. A good question from Hélène. Thank you again. So yes, her question is really around like the financial gap. So I'm thinking about Matthews with all the work that you're doing at Renew Capital in order to tackle the issue of what we talk about, the missing middle. So would love to know about what is Renew's Capital approach about that challenge.
Yeah, and it's a good question. And it's a tricky one to answer. And I'm going to be politically correct in it. Normally, I would give her quite a bit of feedback on even the language she used, which I think it starts there. But first and foremost, I'm going to bring it back to this side of the pond. You have to look at how money is flowing into Africa first off. So let's just park that on the side for a second. And then when it gets there, what do they find? And what you find in most countries, and everyone is unique, of course. Africa is not a country. It's 54 unique places. Yeah, but it's kind of also has very similar challenges. And it's extremely fragmented. And so the answer is, in my opinion, summarized by something that someone gave me advice when I first moved to Ethiopia 13 years ago. He was building a hospital. And he said, I'm going to build a hospital, but you'd be shocked what I'm going to have to do. I have to do all of my own plumbing, all my own electricity. I've got to build an entire training facility to train up all my staff. I've got to do all of the financing for this. I've got to help buy ambulances. Nothing is there and ready for you to just plop down a model that might work here in most countries across Africa. So what we can do goes back to that part where the money's coming in. A lot of money, about $40 billion a year, is given to Africa by OECD countries. I think it's up to 60 billion right now. Most of that money isn't really focused. And my biggest criticism is that if that money was coming in and being blended alongside investors, that capital can actually do all of that hospital building work to get all of that ecosystem developed, so that when investors do come, you have deals that are ready to go. You've got law firms that know how to structure a deal. You've got accounting firms that know how to audit. You've got CFOs that are ready to help that company manage that capital. You've got entrepreneurs that know the difference between a small business, a venture startup, a venture-backed startup company, or a large business. All of that is ready for it to go, but it's not there right now. And actually, the government of Canada, which is brilliant in its innovation, and it's one of the only countries that I've seen do this, they realize that very early. So we work with Global Affairs in the 14 countries we're working with to come into that ecosystem before we put a penny in and get all of that work done. We're training accountants, we're training law firms, we're training companies. And when it's ready, we start to build that pipeline, and then we can invest it, and we can get that capital coming from wealthy family offices, wealthy individuals that would write checks to charities and start backing entrepreneurs like that. I think that ecosystem building work has to happen at scale for Africa to really bridge that gap that she's talking about.
I see. Thank you. So to summarize, it's not just like two parties, but a whole ecosystem that need to collaborate together. Thank you. I don't know if there is any addition that you would like to add from the panel. Yeah?
I'd be happy to. And I want to kind of introduce almost a slightly different perspective, you know. Money is given to Africa. That's an important statement right there, because how does the money come? Or what is the channel? And part of where the challenge is even when we look at development actors. You look at some of the biggest players, and I won't name them, but one of the very, very big development partners, having a conversation with them, and they said, we pledge X amount to Africa every year, but less than 13% hits the continent. So money is not really given to Africa. And so as the Mastercard Foundation, one of the things we started to realize is the value of African and indigenous organizations and partners to drive the work. So actually, when you hit the ground and connect to the right partners, you'll find there was probably some infrastructure in place. Maybe it wasn't mature, maybe it wasn't where it needed to be, but there's a heck of a lot of health workers in different ways who could be skilled more, but they're there and ready, and you could tap into them already, right? There's probably different things existing, but unless you are working with African or indigenous organizations, you won't see what exists, and you may start right at the beginning. That also means you're starting to build disconnected from existing structures that already are trusted in communities. So there's already now parallel systems emerging, which don't help to drive the shifts that are necessary. So I think we need to start re-looking at the continent and asking what truly is here. And can we stop and listen and understand, and then leverage what's existing to build something that then gains traction much faster? And just to finish, for the Mastercard Foundation, the bulk of what we do is in Africa. Young Africa Works is our strategy, and it's 30 million young Africans in dignified work by 2030 is the core issue we work on. Why? Because Africa is the youngest and fastest growing population in the world. It has massive opportunity for anybody willing to open their eyes and understand what's happening. The fastest markets are going to be in Africa, fastest growing markets, greatest opportunity for profit because education levels are improving, disposable income is increasing for people. So you've got to see it for what it is. So I'll stop there, but I hope that's a slight shift in perspective.
Thank you. So leveraging on the existing systems that we have there. Thank you. So now we'll go on the next question. It's from Emmanuel Okpala, who works in renewable energy and financial access for renewable energy from Nigeria. So let's go on that video.
Thank you and Hawa for this insightful panel discussion. My name is Emmanuel Okpala, and I lead Zero Emission Technologies, a renewable energy startup headquartered in Lagos, Nigeria. In our quest to make climate action affordable, we are building PowerVest, a solar asset financing platform that uses a consumption-based finance model for the $9.2 billion decentralized energy market in Nigeria. We are currently raising $3 million to help 300 energy-intensive businesses benefit from our single-digit interest rates and long-term financing for solar energy assets acquisition over the next 18 months. We have observed two major challenges for African entrepreneurs, which are access to energy as well as access to capital. According to KPMG report, entrepreneurs in Nigeria spend 40% of their capital on energy costs. This is due to heavy reliance on fossil generators. Unlike in the West, there are no incentives for clean energy adoption here, and traditional financing is short-term with high interest rate of over 30%. Reports also indicate that funding for African ventures in 2023 saw its lowest level since 2017, with a nearly 40% decline. We aim to provide the most affordable and convenient solutions to eradicating energy poverty in Africa. We understand this is a capital-intensive venture with a long-term profitability outlook, and thus seek impact-driven partners who are aligned with our mission to support our efforts through debt and equity finance. So my dear panelists, please, based on your experience, what are the common pitfalls African founders encounter while fundraising? Are there also insights you could share with us on how we can gain investors' trust, secure more funding, and keep the continent?
Oh, Okay, so I guess he said keep the continent thriving. So yeah, so that question from Emmanuel is pretty complementary to the first question from Hélène. So I would like to ask this question to Renato. With all the work that you've done, yes, with Mada Ventures, but also in your previous experiences working with entrepreneurs, like what are the common pitfalls and mistakes that we see from entrepreneurs themselves? Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks, Emmanuel, for the good question. Very quickly on the business model you're running, there's a few very successful ones that have been ran primarily in East Africa. Phoenix International, they were acquired by NG in 2018. Super efficient. Sun King, they're running on the renewables, providing the actual hardware as well as the financing. So a couple of areas to take a look if you can emulate those business models, you're sure for success. Just to unpack on the main topics, we have fundraising challenges as well as capturing investor trust. I want to set the context ahead. So we're discussing venture capital in Africa. That's the type of financing we're discussing. In 2023, there was $3.5 billion invested onto the continent in VC terms. This was done across 547 deals. Needless to say, this is shy of previous years, so 46% decline in value and 28 some odd % in terms of number of deals. So globally and in Africa, everyone's been feeling the winter, the funding winter. Of these deals, 70% were seed, so early stage, think under $250,000 tickets, less than $1 million rounds. This is what we would quantify relatively as seed deals. And in terms of sector, we have 40% in fintech, followed by clean tech, and then shortly after was e-commerce. In terms of geography, largely the lion's share goes to the Big Four. The Big Four being South Africa, Kenya, Egypt, Nigeria, in no particular order. In these Big Four countries, there's been massive devaluation in 3 of them in particular, upwards of 50%. So this is also important context to keep in mind when you're discussing challenges. When you have these funding, and now I'm getting to the answer here. When you have these funding rounds, they're primarily branched into pre-seed, seed, Series A, Series B. There's bridges in between that have other qualifications, but nonetheless, depending where you operate in your stage, you could find challenges. So some of these funds that are mandated for a seed or mandated for pre-seed rounds or mandated for growth, they might also have geographical constraints that are imposed on them by their limited partners, the LPs. They might have sector constraints as well. So when we're talking about challenges in Africa, it really depends on where you're operating, the type of business you're operating, and the size. I alluded to it earlier, but 70% of deals in Africa in 2023 was seed. As you get a little bit on the growth side of deals, you find less investors. The investor pool shrinks eventually. At AMV, Mada Ventures, we're part of the solution, if you could say, filling the gap for these growth stage Series A, Series B deals. We're $110 million. We're focused on Africa, so as long as you're providing some sort of value in Africa, we're excited. Pre-Series A to Series B, we have an allocation for earlier stage investments. As Hawa had mentioned, we're 100% African capital, and we're not the only big player. Norskin, Novastar, Partech, these few folks, they have their funds in excess of $200 million. So the gap is being addressed, but previous to that, you had to go international. So local context was not there. You're combating against that. This is a pitfall for the growth stage folks. If an investor doesn't understand your business model, but it's thriving in Africa, something like mobile money, it's lost. So you're fighting another type of battle there. There's also, I mentioned earlier, there's perceived risk versus actual risk that falls into this bucket too. When you don't have the presence on ground, you don't have the local expertise, you'll miss on this. And unfortunately, some of our growth stage companies on the continent have fallen to this. In terms of building trust, I think nothing speaks like results. If you can drive results, you can execute, you'll drive confidence. From an early stage perspective, you should know your product, you should know your market, you should know who's going to be buying it, if people are willing to buy it. You should know who's actually operating in the sector, who's been successful, who hasn't, reasons why. The idea is not for you to have it all figured out from the get-go, but for you to have your plan figured out from the get-go. Be concise, be sound in your conviction, and go for it. You're going to have to reiterate, but your conviction at the early stage is important. At the later stage, questions I often ask, what were the metrics that you sold your previous investors from the earlier rounds? So I'm a Series A investor. What did you sell your seed investors? Where did you land in terms of those metrics, those targets that you're aiming for? Did you achieve them? Did you not? These are, again, some of the questions that we ask when we're looking at companies, and this is how you build trust. And needless to say, if you've raised money before, you have a pool of investors that have trusted you, and that trust just compounds. And from an early stage company perspective, your earliest investors are going to be your biggest advocates. So make sure that you're utilizing them, leveraging their networks to build your own trust. Hopefully that answers Emmanuel's question.
Yeah, so that's summarized. To summarize, it's really one, building trust and knowing that you start from somewhere. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now we have a question from Nana, who's from Nigeria and who works in the agro-business sector. So let's go on the next video.
Hi, my name is Nana Clay, and I'm from Lagos, Nigeria. I'm the founder and CEO of Clay Foods. Clay Foods is an innovative, award-winning food processing company dedicated to addressing the challenge of obesity as a major contributor to health issues such as cancer, diabetes, and hypertension. Our goal and mission is to revolutionize the food industry by providing innovative, nutritious, and delicious products that contribute to the overall health and well-being of our consumers. In today's world, approximately 800 million people face chronic food insecurity, struggling to access an adequate, nutritious diet. Alongside this challenge, 2 billion adults globally suffer from key micronutrient deficiencies, which can have severe health implications. A number of 2 billion adults are classified as either obese or overweight, leading to these health issues such as diabetes, hypertension, and cancer. We at Clay Foods play a crucial role in addressing the issue of macro and micronutrient deficiencies in adults through our innovative food solutions. Our flagship product, the amazing Tom Brown cereal and the multigrain swallows flour, are specifically formulated to combat these nutritional deficiencies and promote overall health. So this leads me to my question. In an interconnected and unpredictable global economy, how can SMEs, especially African agro-businesses like ours, strategically position themselves for collaboration to ensure long-term growth and sustainability?
Great. Thank you so much, Nana. An important stat to know is that I think 2/3 of the workforce in sub-Saharan Africa is actually in agribusiness. So it's a very important industry in the continent. And yet, until now, a lot of food is still imported. Right. So definitely you need collaboration. As we say, you can go fast by yourself, but you can go further with other people. So yes, my question goes to Julie Gichuru. So like how could we tackle that?
So Nana, first of all, congratulations on what you're doing and thank you for the question. So I think I'll start with perspective, right? I think SMEs need to have perspective on who they are and the potential. And with that comes the self-confidence to position yourself for success. And I think in some ways you've captured that as well. It's a difficult world. And Africa is learning more and more. It happened during COVID, but the geopolitical realities mean that Africa needs to face the question of the ability to feed herself, to be independent. We've already mentioned fastest growing population in the world. So the markets are on the African continent. Once you understand this as a small and medium-sized business, it may give you a different perspective on where you're positioned and what the true potential is for you. I think the next thing is knowledge, right? Make sure you immerse yourself in understanding your sector, mapping of the sector, understanding the policy issues at play, et cetera, right? And where the markets exist and what you can tap into, right? Where the lowest hanging fruit is for your business. I think that's really helpful. Then it's networks. And again, I think we've kind of referred to the importance of networks. There's an African proverb that tells us a single bracelet does not jingle. And so the power of leveraging, trusted, villages that you may create is really, really critical, right? And strategic engagement. So I feel sometimes, I could be wrong, but with a lot of MSMEs, it's almost whatever we can tap into at any point. How about sitting back and saying, what is it I truly can leverage, or what is the pathway for my business for success? And then immersing yourself in that. So don't chase every opportunity. Don't knock on every door. Be very strategic about what you seek to achieve, the markets you're going into, the policy shifts required, etc. And that brings me now to voice and agency. I think the opportunity, once you have all these things together, perspective, knowledge, networks, strategy, is to say, how do I position my voice and build agency around what I do that makes me recognized, that enables the doors to open even faster when I knock? I hope that's helpful. And I think if those things are kept top of mind for most of these young businesses, you will be able to leverage opportunities that perhaps you didn't quite recognize previously. Thank you.
Thank you so much to really advocate for yourself and know where to position yourself. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if you want to add anything on that. Okay, so let's go on the next question. So he's also from Nigeria. His name is Israel, and he actually works in InsurTech. So yeah, let's listen to him.
Israel here. I lead the team at Rewe Technologies. We're an agri-insurtech startup where we're very convinced that even the clouds should be held accountable. That's why we are offering affordable and inclusive weather insurance to protect the income of smallholder farmers across Africa, leveraging satellite data, deep learning technologies, and SMS to help them thrive and reach maximum potential. The journey hasn't been an easy one. We're hard pressed on every side by monumental challenges, both economical, policy, and infrastructural. Particularly, we find ourselves limited by an economic paradox presented by the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA. Navigating Africa as a startup founder presents unique challenges, especially when it comes to travel restrictions and their impact on the AFCFTA. The African Continental Free Trade Area was designed to create a single market for goods and services, with free movement of business, persons, and investments across the continent, which should ideally bolster intra-African trade and support economic transformation. However, the reality on ground is quite different for businesses and startup founders like myself. Travel restrictions can limit the ability to build cross-continental partnerships and scale businesses. I am deeply troubled by this economic conundrum presented by the AFCFTA. Despite its promise of seamless trade and economic integration across Africa, we are confronted with a paradox. The free movement essential for actualizing this vision is hampered by persistent travel restrictions and visa complications, alongside other binding constraints such as policy inconsistencies, infrastructure deficits, political rivalry, and economic nationalism. Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote, at this year's Africa CEO Forum, mentioned that he needs 35 visas to travel across Africa. How do we compete in a system that is rigged against us? Despite the growth of African tech startups, with financial backing increasing at 46% annual rate from 2015 till date, we are still battling against fragmented markets and complex regulations. So how do you suggest we navigate this complex landscape? Considering your extensive interactions within Africa, both as business people and stakeholders in the corporate world, how do we build and scale when faced with such binding constraints?
Yeah, interesting question. And yes, like we're lucky because we are here working in like a Pan-African level. And yes, like Africa is like 54 countries, except in like a few regions, like definitely the markets are highly fragmented. And yes, we talk about visa, but for example, just about flights, sometimes it's easier to travel to Europe than going to another country than, travel within Africa. So my question, I would like to first of all start with Matthew. What are your opinions around that?
Well, first off, that guy should get a microphone and he should be up in front of all of the policymakers because he just nailed it. His name is Israel?
Yes.
Yeah, shoot me an email, Israel. That was brilliantly done. And he's absolutely right. If there's one word, I think, and I don't represent anybody else, this is my opinion, that encompasses Africa's potential, but its biggest challenge right now is scale. It's got the largest population growth. It's the only part of the world that's not dying. Think of that. Everywhere else in the world, people are dying faster than being born, except in Africa. I mean, 1 out of 4 people are going to be from the continent in 25 years. Look at your portfolio. Is 1 out of $4 being invested in Africa? I mean, that's probably not, right? I mean, even if it's 1/40th, like just put a 0 on that. Are we even close? We have to get Africa smart. But his point was there. And man, those governments, they need to get their stuff together. And I think the Continental Free Trade Agreement is such a good idea. And like everything else, it's being challenged in execution. And he nailed it. So I think one thing that, again, back to what investment firms should be doing with their portfolio, and this is, I'm speaking for myself here, and what we are doing, is that we have teams in 14 countries. We know that they can't get on a plane and get a visa to go there. We have teams there. We have local teams on the ground. They are going to do that market research for companies like he's doing. I invested in 2 insurtech companies just like his. Phenomenal ideas, great businesses. But how do I move them from Mozambique up to Tanzania? How do I move them from Ethiopia into Uganda? I'm going through all sorts of legal crap that I have to work through. We have a legal team that guy can never afford, but we can bring that as LPs. We can bring that as investors to their companies. So again, back to what investors have to know when they're going into these markets is that you're not going to have everything local available for you. You have to pull out so many more tools and be ready to bring so much more value to your portfolio than a typical investor does. And you got to pick up that phone, and when he calls, he's got a real need that you have to go and help him address. And sometimes that's working it all the way up the chain in the government. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to aggregate all of that frustration that he just had and bring that to the government leaders that are working on this and say, hey, it's a great idea. It's failing in execution, like so many things, and having those voices rise up. So I think he's phenomenal in his presentation. I think we should get more voices going to African leaders and saying, guys, we got to fix this. It can't be easier for me to go from point A to point B than him. That's ridiculous. Just because I have a US passport, that's not fair. Although it's actually not as easy as you think for me to do that either. I mean, I've been living in Africa for over a decade and it's still a pain in the ass. But it's a possibility for us to fix this, and I think it's a brilliant question, but investors really can play a huge role here, and that's my hope. So shoot me a note. I would love to talk with you. I love your type of business, and I would love to help figure out how you can address some of those challenges from Nigeria and get you to come east and south.
Thank you so much. So yes, like investors have a bigger mandate than funding, but it's also advocating. So thank you for setting the example. I don't know if ever there is any addition you would like to add.
No, yeah. No. So I was there at the launch of the Africa Free Trade, Continental Free Trade Area, and it was a moment. It is a moment for the continent, right? It's not moving fast enough, but it is moving. Let me say that. So even as a Kenyan today, I access many more African countries with less problems than I did 5-10 years ago. So progressively, it's improving. That's not to say it's moving as fast as we want it to, but that's a good thing. The second thing I wanted to say is going back to strategic, right? So you may engage with Matthew, that would be strategic, and then get that support. Or you may look at the ecosystem and say, hey, there's Airtel, which I think is in 15 or 16 African countries today. There's MTN, there's so-and-so, there's so-and-so. Okay. Maybe the best bet is to find a way to work with partners like that, right? So I think, again, it's back to who's on the ground, what's moving, what value do you have, and how can you partner to shift things, right? So I would encourage Israel also to think about that.
Amazing. Thank you. So now we're going into the last video. So his name is Moses. So he actually worked in Kenya. And it's mostly to support investors through financial services. So yeah, let's go on the next video.
Moses Cheng, I'm the CEO and co-founder in Investor Farm. What we do at Investor Farm is we basically provide easy, quick, insured loans to small-scale farmers here in Africa by connecting them to lenders across the world. So it's basically a peer-to-peer lending marketplace. The farmers create a profile through respective agricultural stores. So farmers can access our loans through agricultural stores. And then the agricultural stores are listed on our marketplace where they receive lending from anyone across the world. And then once they receive this lending, this money is disbursed to them, and then they give the farmers the different inputs for which the loan was acquired from. So we've been doing this because, number one, we found out that close to 80% of 50 million farmers across Africa have no access to formal lending. And this is due to a number of factors, from complicated application procedures that are very lengthy, cartels and intermediaries along the way, high purchasing power when it comes to the interest rates they have to pay, and also risky agriculture putting away lenders. And some of the things we did is provide embedding insurance onto our product and just making it easy and quick for farmers to be able to access it. So we've been doing this for a year now. We've received interest from different investors. We have a venture capitalist that's currently supporting us, that's Startup Bootcamp. And yeah, the challenge at AFRISE has been quite amazing, learning from different mentors and different partners as well, and just having a founder's experience in growing the business even better. My question to the panel would be, how do you overcome imposter syndrome, owing to the fact that entrepreneurship as a whole comes out of passion for me, and also just to solve some of the problems I faced. And now just changing it into a business has been quite something, I would say, from my learning. So how do you overcome imposter syndrome when it comes to uncertainties in entrepreneurship? Thank you so much.
Yes, so we talked earlier a lot about like advocating for yourself. So all of you three seem to be pretty confident individuals. So yeah, we'd love to learn from you. Okay, like let's first of all start with Renato. Like, how do you overcome the imposter syndrome?
Thank you, and congrats on what you've built. Super exciting, and there's been a few, again, business models where this is taken off. Complete Farmer in Ghana, we've supported them from at my previous job from an early stage, so super interesting. Plenty of models, so model yourself after some of these successes, and you'll be successful. In terms of imposter syndrome, I try not to reflect too much on it. What I do try to reflect on is things that I can control. What I can control is I know my facts, I know my business, I know my clients, I know my customers. That will change, of course, as you grow and be permeable to this change. Take in data, be ready to change your opinion, be ready to iterate. Don't be ready to question yourself and then fall into this imposter syndrome issue. I think that having the confidence is important, but having the data and having the sound conviction in order to have the confidence is even more important.
How about you, Judy?
Yes, it's a great question. First of all, Moses, you're doing incredible work, right? And you're serving an ecosystem that so needs this work. So I think the awareness that you are enough, right? Let's start there. We've all, well, many of us have dealt with imposter syndrome. The way I dealt with it was, I can only be me. I can only be me. I can't. And so, what am I passionate about? What are my objectives in life? How much can I learn to enable me? So, knowledge. And then go out there and one step at a time, or one leap when you can leap, just keep moving forward, right? That's number one. Number two is service. I learned in my career that service is such a powerful thing that when you focus on others, it removes all those ego issues that come with imposter syndrome and drives you from the stomach, because that's the passion, you know? And so focus on service, right? I think if you just accept yourself and then say, I'm here to serve, and, you know, combine the knowledge and everything else, I think that's going to take you where you need to be. And that is enough. Let me just finish with one small story. It's a young man called Eliud from the Rift Valley in Kenya. Loved to run, built discipline around himself, and just strove to be the best that he could be, putting one foot in front of another and running and running. And a few years ago, he taught the world that man has no limits. Eliud Kipchoge, the simplest man in the world, and maybe the greatest marathon runner of all time. So Moses, you are enough, one step after another.
Amazing. Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, no, I love this topic, actually. I think it's, so we do a lot of training with our founders, and being a founder myself of a company, I just happen to be an investor, but we look at it as we are founders working in Africa right alongside our portfolio companies. And so we spend a lot of time with the founders talking about this, about habits, about the rises and falls, the emotional roller coaster that it means to be a founder of a fast-growing company. And I've sat and had many hour-long discussions and hours of discussions with our founders on this. Right out of the gate, our training is on mindset. And we spend a lot of time on this. And we really try to train right out of the gate, Moses, how critical building your morning habits are. And I know it sounds kind of self-helpy. Trust me, it's not. Being a founder is one of the most competitive sports in the world, entrepreneurship is, and the fail rate is high. And companies often fail because the founders burn out. And if you have questions in your mind about that, and we don't attack that right away and help you with tools, practical tools on how to address that, we're going to be in trouble. So real quick, and we do a whole training around this. We do tons of trainings with our founders around this. That what we do in the morning, we advise all of our CEOs to do this. And I think it's probably their favorite training that we do with them. You know, wake up an hour before all of everyone else in your family household gets up. Immediately read your vision for yourself and where you want to go in your life. Write that down if you don't have it. If anyone in this room hasn't done that, I highly recommend it. I do this every single morning. It's the thing that keeps me in this game, and I love my job. I would have left years ago from Africa, living through civil wars and all sorts of stuff. But what we're trying to do and what we're trying to build is just so awesome. But I remind myself of that every morning. Read it out loud. Then journal, reflect. The journal is probably the #1 most powerful tool you can have as a founder to get through your life. Reflect on what would make today great. Reflect on what you're excited about and what you're grateful for. All right, then go exercise. Exercise and listen to something. 30 minutes, we put our founders on a training program, drink 2 liters of water, and have somewhere nearby where you can write down your ideas and whatever's divine intervention, whatever, but all those problems that plague you will start to pop and they will just start to happen. I can't tell you how many 5 o'clock in the morning WhatsApps I get from our founders saying, I just figured it out. It wasn't me coaching them. It wasn't somebody else. They had it. It's all up here. So mindset as a founder, especially in Africa, where you're buffeted by so many different things, is critical for you to develop and for you to have. And I love that question. And it's something that I believe everyone in this room should do, but every founder and any investor that's investing in a company, really help your founders with that mindset. I think it's really good. Imposter syndrome, it's all packaged up in that stuff. You'll be great.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So Renato, Julie, and Mathieu really learned a lot from you. You are giving like good examples of, advocate and like working really hard for Africa and especially the development of its private sector. So I keep remember of like what I said earlier on like we would like to that after this panel you'll try to see how you can invest and work in Africa. So I would love to know like from you very briefly any action that you will recommend to the audience in order to engage with Africa.
Touch base with people that are on ground operating. Touch base with founders when you can. Do research. The numbers I quoted before, they're from Partech and Brighter Bridges, two good friends of mine. One's a VC fund, the other one's an intelligence platform. They publish reports annually on Africa, and they publish segments, everything all the way down to who the founders are, where they're based, where they're educated. You'll get a lot of knowledge there and get a scope of what's happening.
Visit Africa. Karibuni, welcome. Come to the continent. In Kenya, we say, it's the cradle of mankind. So it's home and you are all welcome. Come and visit, smell it, feel it, eat it, eat our food, engage with the continent. And young entrepreneurs like we've heard from today, speak to them and listen and understand what drives them. What do they see? See Africa through their eyes. I think that would be a remarkable thing.
And I'll add to that, if you're from the West, leave your guilt baggage at home and take your opportunity goggles and put them on. Go over there looking with fresh eyes. We bring investors all the time over to Africa, and we say that very line to them before they get on the plane. When they get there, they're like, oh my gosh, it is booming over here. I was just here and I never saw any of this. It is the next major growth market. It's going to be one of the top 5 stories of the 21st century. And it's never been... Top
story.
Yeah, I hope so. And it's never been easier for you to actually invest. Think of that number, 1 in 4, right? Start to calibrate and say, how can I even put a little bit of capital? Don't do it stupidly. Don't just, drop it off with your cab driver and say, give it to your brother who's got a startup. Like, think of how to do it. There's companies, there's organizations out there that are trying to build this up. Take a little risk, come and visit, get smart on Africa. Perfect.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. A round of applause for our amazing panelists and the AFRISE participants.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you so much.